Oh man, thank you so much for being here bright and early in the morning. I'm sure many of us had a long night last night. So glad to see so many smiling faces, or not smiling faces. That's also okay. So we're going to be talking about selling your clients on open source e-commerce today. And keeping in line with the theme of our entire conference here about open e-commerce, I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective on how at SkyVerge we approach things in terms of comparing open versus proprietary solutions. Give you some concepts on strengths and weaknesses, and try and ensure that you guys can explain these benefits to your clients and sell open e-commerce to them in a way that shows them all of the benefits that they can leverage from an open platform. So to start off, I think that means that we need to tell you a little bit more about me and what I do. And so I've worked at SkyVerge for 4.5 years, which is a long time in the software world, I think. And SkyVerge is the largest WooCommerce partner developer. So we have over 50 premium extensions available on WooCommerce.com. That means that our extensions make up about 15 to 20% of the marketplace currently. We have tens of thousands of customers using our WooCommerce software. So that might not be news to many of you if you've purchased an extension already. You've probably seen our name. But you may not know a couple other brands that our company owns, which can give you a little bit more context here. So if you've seen our booth, you've seen Jilt. It's automated lifecycle emails that make your company more money. And this is available for merchants that use Shopify, WooCommerce, and easy digital downloads. So we've actually got a lot of experience outside of WooCommerce. We work with EDD pretty extensively, another open platform. And we work with Shopify, which is a closed proprietary platform. So it's a very different ecosystem from what many of us are probably used to. But then one that usually surprises people is that we also have a brand called ShopStorm, under which, for just shy of 4 years, we've built Shopify apps. So we're a Shopify partner developer. And we've built 6 apps, some of which are the most highly rated apps in the marketplace. We have thousands of 5-star reviews. We have almost 10,000 users in the Shopify space as well. And then the final thing, which Julia mentioned for me, is that I run a site called Sell with WP, where we write tips and news and articles for merchants using WordPress, not just WooCommerce, but any open solution for WordPress. So all that to say that I've spent just about 4 years working with merchants in both proprietary and open source e-commerce solutions, with at least 30,000 merchants across these different platforms, and with over 65 discrete software products. So we've built these products or acquired them, but more importantly, we support them every single day. So every day, our team is working in Shopify, our team is working in WooCommerce, our team is working in easy digital downloads. We've got a lot of other platform experience in BigCommerce and Magento across our team. So we've really got a good bird's eye view of the differences of these platforms and the benefits and strengths and weaknesses of each one. So I'd like to take some time today to go over those strengths and weaknesses and talk about why open source e-commerce matters, because it should matter to your clients, and they're probably not educated on that problem. Why should they care about this? Where does it shine for them? So what are the strengths that we can be conveying to them? What are the weaknesses, and how can we overcome them? And then at the end, if you want to post questions in the WooCommerce Speaker Queues Slack channel, I'd be happy to answer them as well. So I loved that Todd asked yesterday what people in this room are doing. That was amazing, so I don't have to do it. Thank you, Todd. That it was so cool to see how many agencies and freelancers and people here who are working with clients. That's amazing. And so thank you, because the job you do is phenomenal. And the thing, though, is that you might not always be in the merchant shoes. I know we had some store owners here, which is fantastic. But you may not always be in the position where you can really empathize with what the merchant is going through. So I'd like to start with a little bit of an exercise. And to think for a second that we are a merchant selling laptop stands in a successful retail and online store. Before we get too far into this, I want you to know this is based on a true story. I got some theme music over here. Thanks for that. So I'm going to change what the merchant sells, but this is a story that is 100% true. And so to get those laptop stands to market, what do you have to do for that? And that process is amazing. I've been going to some merchant meetups lately and kind of hearing their stories and how they bring their products to market. And it is mind-blowing. It is so intimidating, all the things that you have to know to do that. So to get a laptop stand to market, you've got to first design the product. You've got to look at materials, source prototypes, compare those prototypes, see what you can manufacture efficiently and in a cost-efficient way. Once you've decided on a product, which is an enormous process, you've got to look at manufacturing. Right? How can I bring this to market? Am I going to be manufacturing directly? Am I going to be drop shipping? And after you've done all that work, which is a tremendous amount of work, then you can finally start to look at how you're going to get this in the hands of consumers. And it's mind-blowing to me just the level of planning that takes. The merchants I was talking to at a meetup a couple weeks ago, one of them takes yearly trips to China just to make sure that manufacturing is up to standards for their products. It's a tremendous amount of work. And so once you've gone through all of this work, now you can finally figure out, well, how am I going to sell? And so when you get to this point, if you're selling laptop stands, you probably want to have your own store, but you probably also want to sell on Amazon, right? And Amazon is a huge marketplace for merchants that are selling, consumer products like this. So you start to sell on Amazon, and after 3 years, your laptop stand company is now making $1.5 million a year. You have 9 employees. You have excellent ratings on Amazon, 98% positive feedback, fast replies, on-time delivery, tracking information that supports that delivery estimate. You have a 0% merchant cancellation rate. You have less than 0.2% defective rate. By all standards, you're doing amazing, right? But the problem is that as a seller of something that probably more technical users are going to be using, right? If someone's using a laptop stand, they're a pretty heavy laptop user. The problem is that your users probably know this one secret trick about Amazon, and that's that you can get free return shipping if you mark a product as defective or not as advertised. And a desk is a personal thing, right? So not everybody's going to love your product, even if it's great, and they're going to want to return it. And the thing is that when they do that, if you get 5 to 10 pieces of negative feedback, that's all it takes, no matter what your volume is, for your store to be completely removed from Amazon. You can lose the majority of your revenue instantaneously. You can go from making over $4,000 a day, and in this case, for this merchant, to making $900 a day. That's immediately firing 3 of your staff, families that are depending on your business to support them. That's immediately reducing all of your distribution. Now you have all of this inventory, $300,000 worth of inventory that you're storing that you can't move anywhere. This is a massive, massive risk for merchants. And this story in particular is from a blog I like called My Wife Quit Her Job, The Dangers of Selling on Amazon. And so while we can think about this as a cautionary tale about marketplaces, it's really a cautionary tale about not owning the system that you're selling on. That if you can be removed at any point from that system, that is a tremendous risk to business that merchants don't really consider, because they look at it and say, I'm launching a store, it's going to be here, it's great. And if that closes down, or if they're removed for any perceived breach of terms of service, their business is completely demolished overnight. So that's a huge risk we want to educate clients on, and we want to tell them about what they can do to mitigate these risks. And then we want to talk about what you can do in this room to make sure that you're providing them with the best experience possible, that there are no downsides to using open e-commerce. So I am a former high school teacher, so apologies, but we will do a few definitions first. This one is for Patrick Garman, who was debating this in the WooCommerce community Slack the other day. Where are you, Patrick? I hope you're paying attention. So I'm going to focus my talk primarily on self-hosting open source solutions, not in the sense that you're like running on a server in your garage, but that you're using the software on a hosting company that you're contracting with directly. So open source, often referred to as free source software, or free software, does not mean that the source code is available. It refers to being open in the sense of what users can do with the software, that they can access the code, they can study it, change it, modify it, redistribute it. There's also shared source software, which means the source code is available online. Something doesn't have to be shared source to be open source, right? Open source refers to the licensing for it. And then closed source refers to software that users are restricted in their ability to modify it, or more importantly, to use it. So you're restricting user freedoms there in terms of what they can do in terms of, with the software. So we're going to focus on open source software that's being self-hosted, because those freedoms are important. And so that gives you the most flexibility in what you're doing with that software. So first, I want to take a look at a few myths about open source. And since many of you are developers, I'm sure that you've been asked these things by your clients. And they're saying, well, are we going to use WooCommerce? Is it going to be okay for us? Should we be looking at Shopify? Should we be looking at BigCommerce? Should we be looking at, there's like millions of these platforms I can't even keep up with anymore, right? And so these are questions that you want to be able to answer, and you might not have the experience with these platforms to do so. So there are a few myths that pretty much every agency I talk to wants to say, how do I communicate this to my clients? The first one is open source software only for small sites or stores. Can open e-commerce scale? And I think Todd did an amazing job of answering that question yesterday. Yeah, HEB over $100 million per year using WooCommerce. That's amazing, right? And I did rag on Patrick earlier, but I have to thank him for some of these stats here. So thank you, Patrick. There are some theoretical limits, right, to WooCommerce. You could take 5 orders every single second. That doesn't sound like a lot, but let's do the math on that. If you sustain that for just 1 hour, that's almost 20,000 orders in a single hour. If you could sustain that over a 24-hour period, you'd get 500,000 orders in a day. That is an absurd amount of orders. And then here's the thing. We're already going past that, right? Kevin talked about the changes in WooCommerce 3.0 yesterday that have already made strides here. And WooCommerce 4.0 next year is going to make even bigger strides. And these numbers are going to be obliterated, I think, at that point. So you can have, thousands of concurrent users, thousands of orders going into your site every hour. And WooCommerce can totally handle that. But here's the thing. This doesn't apply to 99% of merchants, right? They're not going to hit these theoretical limits, and they're already expanding. So can WooCommerce scale? Can your platform scale with you? Absolutely. There's no reason that 99% of merchants can't be on WooCommerce. It can grow with them. And by the time they get this big, it's already going to be surpassing these limits. I'm going to call that one busted. Yes, completely busted. Very few merchants are going to bump against scaling issues. So is open source e-commerce lower cost? And I had an interesting discussion at the speaker sponsor dinner before the conference where sometimes merchants say it's free. How can it be good? It's totally free. And I think that's sometimes just a weird perception that we get, but open source e-commerce is often lower cost, yeah. The core platform is free. If you're paying for extensions, that's probably going to balance out with what you're paying on another platform. But the thing is that we have to account as well for all of the costs of infrastructure, and that's going to be one thing we talk about a little bit later, is that the infrastructure of hosting your own site and what you put into hardware and what you put into optimization, that's probably going to cancel out costs. And so in effect, it's plausible, but open source e-commerce might not necessarily be cheaper. I absolutely hate price as a comparison, so I don't think that's really the best way to frame a conversation with a client anyway, because we want to get them the best solution and the one that's most appropriate for their store and not the one that is going to be looking at cost in the determining factor. The final question I get a lot, are open source e-commerce platforms harder to use? That's a great question. So when you're getting ready to set up a site for a client, what are you doing? Well, there's tons of steps here, right? We need to figure out a hosting provider. And people have no idea what this means, and nor do they necessarily need to, right? So when you say you need a hosting provider for your website, people are, okay, what's a hosting provider do? Well, they're going to serve the files for your website, and when people access that, they're going to get the files, the PHP files, and the HTML and CSS and everything that makes up your website. And I tried to explain this to my younger sister the other day, and she was like, what do you mean the files? It's like, okay, so let me step back. Let's talk about how the internet works. And it was going to be a very long conversation, so we stopped there. But these are not things that she needs to know, right? And then not only that, we talk about domain registration and DNS hosting, which are hopefully 2 separate things for you. And these are not things that she has any frame of reference for, right? So if she wants to set up a website, this is a really difficult thing for her to do because she doesn't understand how this works. And then at some point, you're probably going to need FTP access and the ability to manipulate the files on that website as well. And even if the merchant's not doing this themselves, they're going to need to be able to provide it to someone else at some point to assist them. So these are difficult concepts for merchants. And if they were doing this entirely on their own, they've got to be a self-starter. They've got to be willing to be a DIYer and to learn these things. And so fortunately, that's why we have you in this room. But yes, it's pretty difficult for a merchant to get set up by themselves, right? Open source software is most powerful when it's being self-hosted, but there's a lot of technical skills that are required to do that, and that's going to be one of the biggest challenges in selling merchants on open source e-commerce, right? So that's one of the things we're going to need to address. So let's start with the things that first we want to sell. What are the strengths of these platforms? And a lot of times I get questions from family members like, oh, you work on WordPress. Isn't that insecure? There's like vulnerabilities and stuff. And it's free. Can it be good, right? It's for bloggers, right? Is this something that people can use? And all of those things are misconceptions. There's tons of strengths. of using an open platform. So I'd like to go through some of those strengths, which many of you are probably familiar with. But the first one being freedom, and that goes back to our Amazon example a little bit earlier, right? That when you are owning the platform that you're selling on, the instance of that platform, no one can remove you from it. That ownership and freedom is one of the most important things that you're selling to your clients. And in fact, anyone who chooses open source e-commerce, that's usually the #1 reason that they choose it. So pretty much every company that chooses something open source is saying that freedom from vendor lock-in, and the part of that quote that I've cut off is freedom from vendor choices, right? That if your vendor chooses to do something on the platform, you know, if you host the platform, you don't have to abide by that. You can do what you need to do for your store. So, what are we selling to clients? The first is no data loss, okay? So, you could lose vital data, such as a customer list or orders, if the platform closes or boots your store off the platform. Now, there's a couple things there. Clients think that they can't be booted from the platform, right? I've signed up for a store, I'm paying them, they can't remove me. It doesn't matter if you've breached the terms of service of the platform, as long as they think you have, you can be shut down. But the thing there that clients forget about is that you're not just gonna lose orders or customers. Think about how much data is on their site. Product photos, product descriptions, right? Inventory. All of these things, if you lose, are going to be severely detrimental to your business. So that data loss is a hugely important thing when you're talking to clients about open source, is that you own your data, and no one's going to take that from you. Even if the platform closes down, you're still up and running. If WooCommerce were completely stopped tomorrow, it's not going to be developed anymore, all of your clients in this room are totally fine. They can continue to use it. And at least in the short term, they have absolutely no issues. Developer independence being another one. And so this is one that we've unfortunately seen from merchants using hosted apps, is that if the app gets closed down, you as a merchant can't do anything about it, right? You stop using it, it's gone. You've got to find new tooling immediately, probably on short notice. Whereas with an open platform, that doesn't happen. You just keep using it. You might have to try and find someone else to maintain it. Maybe someone takes over the project, but it doesn't depend on the original creator. And so that distributed nature of open source development is hugely beneficial for merchants. We're not just relying on one person who might get tired of selling the app, right, or who doesn't want to do it anymore. They have complete and total freedom over it. And then usage freedom. So proprietary systems can remove you at any time, even if you think that you're well within the realm of the terms of service. So ownership is going to safeguard against downtime. Your store is never going to be at the whims of someone else. So then security and code quality is a big one for me. It drives me nuts when I'm sitting at Thanksgiving and family members are saying, yeah, WordPress, I've heard about like a lot of security stuff with that. Well, yeah, of course you have, because people are finding vulnerabilities. The reason you don't hear about it on proprietary systems is because it's hidden, right? It's behind a curtain. There's a great study that we're going to reference in a second that backs this up, that the quality of the solutions is the #2 reason that companies choose open source. And then Carnegie Mellon and Stanford University both conducted independent studies that I really find interesting. Carnegie Mellon found that commercial software, when it's proprietary, has 20 to 30 bugs for every 1,000 lines of code, which is like one class, right? So one object with 20 to 30 unintended behaviors. That's a lot. Whereas the Stanford study concluded that the Linux kernel has 0.17 bugs per 1,000 lines of code. Now this is an extreme example, I will admit. Linux is probably far more bug-free than much of the open source software they're going to be using. But on average, open source projects are going to be far more bug-free and far more secure because the code's open. People are looking at it. People are working on it. Proprietary systems, you have no idea if it's secure or not. You only see what they want you to see. So the amount of dependability of open source is tremendous. So when your clients want to make sure that their store is going to be operational, they can depend on open source more than they can depend on a proprietary system. Which brings us to flexibility. This is my biggest one. And having been a developer on these platforms, this is a huge point for me. Flexibility of an open source e-commerce system is massive. And the ability to customize and fix software is the #3 reason that people choose open source. Right? They realize how important it is to be able to change things when you need to change them. So for example, with products and storage, if you're using a hosted platform, you've probably found that you can't actually create the kind of products you want to create. You might be stuck with 100 variations of that product and that's it. Well, if you're selling something pretty customizable, that's going to be difficult for you. You're not going to be restricted with an open platform in terms of how many products you can add, how many variations, how many images. With an open platform, your needs dictate the functionality, not the other way around. Features don't dictate what you can do. What you want to do dictates what features are available. And that, for most merchants, is tremendous. You say, I want to run this weird promotional deal that it's going to be like buy one, get one free, but then if you buy 3, you get 2 free, and then if you buy 5, you get 3 free. And you're looking at that as a developer, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be fun. But you can do it with an open platform. If you're on a hosted platform, you have to say, sorry, that's not possible. Right? I can't manipulate this platform to that level. So extensibility of the platform is a big one. Proprietary software may get you 90% of the way there. But if it only gets you 90% of the way there, it doesn't help you. You can't extend that. It's not flexible. You can't take an app that's hosted and say, it does 90% of what I need, but I just want it to do this little other thing. Because most of the time, you're not going to have an API that lets you access that. And so you've got to start from scratch. Whereas with an open source solution, if you say, this plugin gets me 90% of the way there, but I just need a little bit more, we can say, great. A developer can hook in and finish this out for you, and you can have exactly what you want. Extensibility is massive, and you don't have that on a proprietary system. And then in terms of contribution, all right, I had this recently with a platform where I found a bug in the platform. A query that I was trying to do was taking like 50 seconds to execute, and it was like, okay, this is too long for what I'm trying to do here. You know, I could help you optimize this if I had access to the code base. We're a team of software developers. And I have to wait while they say, sorry, we're going to look at this sometime soon. And here I am, left with no ability to fix that, even though I have the tools and resources to do so. If this were an open platform, I could fix it myself on my instance and then push that fix out to everybody else using it. So that ability to fix and contribute to the platform is also a big one that merchants aren't going to have to sit around and wait for the platform decisions. They can take things into their own hands and get it done. So I have sort of a comparison that relates to this as well. And I'm not going to be picking on anything. This is our Shopify app, so I'm not picking on some poor, helpless developer, all right? But let's compare WooCommerce product add-ons to Shopify Product Customizer, which is built by our team. And in terms of flexibility, this is an amazing example. So product add-ons is a super popular plugin. You can take it, add new options. You can say, I have this t-shirt, I want to accept someone's name, and I'll screen print it on the back. Cool. Add a text field to the product, accept it. What if I want to charge $5 for that? Yeah, cool. We can do that. Filter the price. It's in the cart. Price is set. It's done. Now let's talk about what we have to do with Product Customizer, because it does basically the same thing. So Shopify merchants selling t-shirts say, OK, I want to add a last name to the t-shirt. OK, cool. We can do that. We've got to install it into your theme, because we don't have a hook system for us to hook that in, so you can't use it until we install it. Once it's installed, though, that text field's going to show up. Great. Now I want to add $5 for people to do that with their name. OK, so let's take a look at what we can do here. There's no fees API. The only way to get costs into the cart is to add a product into the cart. There is literally no other way to increase the price of something. OK, so let's use a hidden product. Yeah, here we go, right? Here we go. So we're basically going to use this hidden product as a fees API. Let's make it 1 cent, and we can change the quantity around. Great. We're going to add this product into the cart with the main product. That's going to increase the price of it. Now we've got our $5 fee, except the merchant has one of those little menu carts. So now it says, well, you have 501 products in your cart. They don't like that very much, with good cause. OK, let's add some JavaScript to your store to hide that. So instead of saying 500, it says 1. Cool. Then they visit the cart page. And now it says main t-shirt product, item customizations product, 500. All right, now we've got to hide that thing. Now we've got to also take that $5 and try and put that on the main product's price, hide that line item for item customizations. OK, so it's sort of hidden. Let's hope the theme is standard, because if it's not, if it's updating itself via Ajax or something, we might have some bigger problems, because it's not going to update our hidden product. But we can work around that. It's a lot of gymnastics, but we can work around that. Great, now we get to checkout. Can't help you, sorry, it's closed. I can't access it. So at checkout, merchants are stuck with that sitting there as a line item. There's literally nothing we can do. And that is a terrible experience, right, for their customers, who they care about, just like we care about them. And they can't take that any further because we have no access to the platform to be able to make that change. And then on the flip side of that, when you talk about the merchant experience, okay, how do you add a product add-on? Well, you go to the edit product page and it's sitting there in product data. You add your add-ons and you're good to go, right? Well, with a closed source platform, you can't do that. You can't change the edit product page. It's locked. There's nothing there. You have to say, okay, click this button that says go to the app, and then go to the app, and then go to the product page in that app, and then you can add the options to the product in that page. Yeah, say that 5 times fast. It's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult. And not having access to that part of the platform is really difficult for developers and merchants alike because you can't give them an optimized, seamless experience. There's no way that they can take that and say, yes, this is awesome, I love it, it looks great, I totally understand how to use this, because you can't give them context, right, which is hugely important when we're designing user interfaces, that you can't give them context about where those options are going to be displayed and where they can add them. So that flexibility for us as developers is absolutely massive. If you don't have APIs that you need, you may have to do gymnastics, like hidden products, to do what your customers and what your clients want, or you've got to say, sorry, I can't do this. I don't have the access I need to do this. That flexibility is tremendous, and it's something that clients don't realize, and that if you've not worked extensively on the platform, you may not realize. It's really hard to do what you want to do once it becomes non-standard if you don't have access to the entire platform and the entire source code. So the other big thing for me in terms of open e-commerce is interoperability. Now, everyone who's worked on WordPress knows this, and it is a huge, huge benefit for open source e-commerce. So with WooCommerce, we've seen that you can pick any shipping you want, right? With an open platform, you can often find pre-built integrations. So you can say, great, I'm going to connect to this shipping service. There's a plugin that does it. I drop it in. I'm ready to go. With a closed source platform, because developers can't do this as easily, you may not have that, right? Or you might not even have APIs in place that allow you to do what you need in terms of shipping. You can choose how you're paid, right? So this is a big one for me, having built a ton of payment gateways at Skyverge, is that when merchants are taking payments, they want to do it in a way that makes sense for their customers. Aviva said this yesterday. PayFast is huge in South Africa, right? Well, if you're on a hosted platform and they don't offer it, you can't offer it. You can't insert that payment processing method into the hosted platform. And this is huge for lots of local merchants in different places. For example, if you're selling to Dutch merchants, good luck getting a credit card number. You're going to have to offer debit. And if your platform doesn't do that, then your customers are not going to be comfortable giving you their payment details because they can't pay in a way that makes sense to them. And then we have the WordPress multiplier. And this is a huge one. Okay, so not only do you have a massive plugin and theme ecosystem, but many people forget about the entire site experience. And so if you're setting up a store on a hosted platform, what is that hosted platform geared towards? It's geared towards your store. It's geared towards e-commerce, and it has all these features related to e-commerce. What is your WooCommerce store related to? It's an entire website. It's for your business, right? You have excellent SEO. You have content. You have the ability to segment and differentiate your customers with roles or memberships or something else. If you try to do this on a hosted platform, you're going to have a bad time. All right, try running a site that has memberships or forums on a hosted platform. And good luck. Come back to me when you get frustrated. Because it's not possible for you to really differentiate parts of your site and to differentiate your customers from one another in a way that's really easy and makes sense. This is especially important for wholesale. For merchants that are selling wholesale, it's difficult to adjust price on platforms, as we've seen, where you don't have direct access to the source code. But then you also don't have a really great way of differentiating your customers from one another. And then content is a big thing there as well. How is your client marketing? Are they using videos? Are they building a community with forums? Are they doing blog posts? Are they doing some other kind of content? Are they doing case studies, right? If you're on a hosted platform, you might have pages, and you're dumping all of that into a page, I guess, right? But if WordPress, you're adding a custom post type for what they want to do, and you're off to the races, and it looks great, and it functions in a way that makes sense. So that ability to not just build a store, but to build an entire site, an entire business presence online is a massive, massive benefit that needs to be considered, and you need to make sure that clients are aware of that trade-off, that if you're going with a hosted platform, you might not have all the flexibility you want in terms of content, in terms of marketing. You might gain other sales channels or something like that, but you're trading off one of your most valuable ways of getting people to your store in the first place. So the final one for me is about community. And as someone who came from teaching high school before I got into the software space, this was amazing to me, how much content and how many people out there who are willing to help you and to welcome you with open arms, right? It's amazing how many tutorials are out there. Brian Richard sitting back there is a great example of that, right? You can learn almost anything in WP sessions, right? And it's all out there that you have access to it. So community is a huge thing. And if you're passing things off to clients or you're looking for some information yourself, you've got a lot of resources out there. You've got the WordPress.org forums, which I think the core team does an amazing job of trying to keep up with that in the WooCommerce forums. There's an absurd amount of questions there. So if you're looking for some volunteer time, that would be really helpful. You have the documentation and community Slack for Woo. There are Facebook groups as well that have a lot of great content, and I'll put my own shameless plug up there for Sell with WP as well. And we've written a lot of merchant-focused content as to how do I do this and what tools do I need to implement it. So there's a ton of community around open platforms that I frankly don't see in hosted platforms, right? It's way smaller, way more niche, and community in WordPress is amazing. So how are we addressing weaknesses? So we talked about strengths, right? Content, the entire site experience, the super flexibility and interoperability that WordPress and WooCommerce can give you. Where is it weak? And we talked about this a little bit earlier. One thing is setup, right? So trying to get people up and running with a store is hard. As we saw with Todd's slides yesterday, the onboarding experience is getting much better. There are some really great improvements going there, but that setup and configuration is still really difficult. The good thing is, everyone in this room is setting up stuff for your clients, so they've already jumped that hurdle just by virtue of having you on their team. So great, we've already taken care of that weakness. The second one is optimization. And this one is where hosted platforms are tying the software experience together with hardware in a way that we have to be considerate of when we're trying to match this. So quality hardware, intelligent caching, other performance enhancements, they don't always come out of the box. Right? And if your client isn't with a hosting company that's going to be sure that they're providing this optimization for them, or if you're doing that in terms of the application layer on the site, these are things that they're going to be missing without you. So the second thing you want to consider is optimization. How can I make sure that the user experience and the site experience are going to be at a level that's comparable to a platform that has all of that baked in together? So that's making sure that you're working with a great hosting provider. That's making sure that you're paying attention to caching and performance in terms of the plugins you're using, and making sure that they have analytics and tools that they might not have baked in just yet, so that they can track things that are going on in their site. And then the final one is maintenance. All right, security patches and software updates are foreign languages to merchants, right? And they shouldn't have to worry about this, right? Do you think about updating Chrome? It just happens for you, and you're happy about it. There's no reason that merchants should have to think about these things. Right? So as a company, you can be selling this on your clients. I'm going to take care of everything for you. You're going to run your business, and I'm going to support it, and I'll be the foundation for it. And tied into maintenance, there is one thing there that you have to help them with in terms of decisions, and that's with things that are going to be sustainable for you to maintain. So the one thing that disappoints me sometimes in open source is that if projects don't have enough financial backing, they can die out. So you want to make sure that you're selective with your clients in choosing solutions that have economic backing and are going to be viable for the long term. Because if that open source project dies, it's now your responsibility to maintain it. And pretty much none of us in this room want to be the primary point of contact for maintaining something that has been abandoned. So that maintenance and sustainability issue is something that you can overcome with your clients. But the great news is that every single person in this room is probably already doing that, right? That's part of what you're selling to your clients already. You're selling them optimization, you're selling them maintenance, you're selling them, you build your business and I'll worry about your site. So responsibility is the final thing that is a huge point, right? If you're on a hosted platform and you want to set up that crazy buy two, get one free, buy three, get two free, who knows what structure, you probably have the platform and you can say, hey, I'm trying to do this, how do I do it? And they can support you with that. With an open platform, that might be a little bit more difficult. WooCommerce does a great job of supporting the core plugin that is entirely free within their team. But that responsibility, who's making that choice, that's a more difficult thing. So the largest issue at hand is who's going to be ultimately responsible for the site. If there are conflicts that need to be tracked, whose job is it to do that? Because on a hosted platform, since they own everything, it's their job, right? If something's wrong, they're the ones that are going to fix it. But with an open source solution, okay, I've got WordPress, I've got WooCommerce, I've got this extension, I've got that extension, and there's something going on and I'm not sure what's happening. So you might reach out to the extension developer and say, okay, I think there's a conflict here. What's going on? And then the extension developer is going to look at it and say, well, this only happens with this other plugin, and maybe I can find the conflict. Maybe it's a little more difficult than that, and I can't. But you can't use these two things together. Okay, well, if that's a deal breaker for your business and you need to use these two things together, who's responsible for trying to figure out how to make that work, right? Well, if it's not you, it's the merchant. And so you're selling them that responsibility. I'll take care of this. I'll take ownership of it. I'll be responsible for it. Who determines the best way to do things? Who's the boss of this site? So the accessibility of open source is a huge draw, right? If I'm an independent merchant, I look at this and say, it's free, there's so many plugins, I'm gonna have great content, I can do anything I wanna do with this site. But then they get into it and they realize that, well, I'm the owner of this site. And so it's my responsibility to do this, and I might not have the tools I need to. So you're selling them that responsibility. You're selling that you'll be the force multiplier for their store. That while they are building their product line, and they're building marketing, and they're building other things about their business, you're making sure that you've got infrastructure covered. So once we've crossed that point, once we've taken care of setup, we've taken care of technical responsibility, we've taken care of tooling, we've taken care of onboarding, those are all the downsides. And everyone in this room has already taken care of that for your clients. So once they've gotten to that point, there's no reason that they shouldn't be using open source, all right? If you're putting their minds at ease, knowing that you're gonna own site issues and that you're gonna be responsible for those site issues, that's the biggest negative already taken away for an open source platform. If you're providing great onboarding, you're taking care of technical points like domain registration, hosting setup, and all of these things, that's one of the biggest things for clients to worry about. Then you're helping them invest in tools. How do I know this is good? How do I know that it's going to be sustainable for my business? Those are questions that you can answer for them. And then you're trying to figure out how to be a partner with them. When they give you what and they give you why, you can tell them how so that they can go do it. They say, I've got this idea, I want to do this promotion, how do we make it happen? And you're the support structure for them. So once a client has gotten to this point, and you've taken on responsibility and you've taken on setup, all they have left are benefits. All they have left are all the things they get from open source e-commerce and none of the negatives or pitfalls or things that are more difficult than with a proprietary system. So you guys in this room are the difference makers for that. Everybody in this room is taking away all of the negatives and leaving clients with all of the positives. So you are creating winning experiences for them and making sure that they're not going to fall to the risks of using a proprietary system in terms of being shut off, hitting downtime, or not being able to have the platform be flexible enough for their needs. So thank you for what you do in terms of making this accessible and the best solution possible for clients, because the people in this room are the key to doing that. So with that said, there's all the SNL fans. There we go. There are a lot of points here that we could talk about even more, right? We could talk about content and checkout and payment processing, and there's a lot of minute differences there. So I'm happy to answer those questions in Slack. If I had done them here, our talk probably would have been a couple hours, and that's not fun for everybody. So if you use the WooConf speaker queues channel in Slack, I'd be happy to answer those questions about differences so that your clients can be educated on whether they should be using WooCommerce or a different system. They should be using WooCommerce. But please feel free to hit me up there. And thank you so much for coming to this talk today and giving me your time. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to find me after this, you can find me at skyverge.com or jilt.com and on Twitter. It's hard to answer questions on Twitter, though, so please do it in Slack. It's a little bit easier to thread a conversation there, and I'm not restricted to 140 characters. I don't think or 280, whatever it is these days, right? So thanks so much, guys. I appreciate your time and attention.